Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today I'm joined by an election judge, an advisor in the Doctorate in Leadership program at St. Mary's University, and the author of two books, Profiles in Kindness and Something Happened Today. So please welcome to the live stream, Dr. Paul Kotz. Paul, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Daniel. Great to see you. Thanks for having me here.
My pleasure. So it's just hitting 3 p.m. here in Taiwan, and it's 2 a.m. there where you live. So I really appreciate you staying up late night to join us to share your wisdom.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Yeah, this is usually past my bedtime, but I'm excited to be with you.
Well, I've got a 7-year-old daughter who's soon turning 18. And my 3-year-old boy, he still likes to come in and give us a cuddle at night. So last night at about 2 o'clock, he was pushing me out of bed so he could sleep with his mum, and I went and slept in his bed, and his bed's only about 2 foot too short for me. So from the knee down was getting cold.
I imagine.
Now, I understand that recently, and you did a wonderful video here on Facebook, you had the passing of a friend. One of your friends passed away, and you'd been friends for around about 25 years, and he suddenly passed away via a heart attack. And I believe for myself and many other people, we believe we're going to live forever. And these things really sneak up on us. And in our life, most people are never taught how to handle grief and the grieving period. You wrote a lovely story, shared a lovely story there on Facebook. How did you handle this process?
It was my friend Dave, and you're right. I had known him for such a long time. We'd been through so many experiences together. He went through a lot of life challenges like we all do, but it gave me a time to pause, Daniel, and say, a lot of us are doing amazing, magnanimous things in the world. Some say you need to handle world affairs, bring in the big bucks, discover a cure for cancer, even champion a cause, or even sing on a national network to be exceptional. And I don't want people to misinterpret me, but when I lost Dave, these things to me are very admirable, and I'm in no way discounting them. But all these are examples of incredible achievements or ways to give back. It made me take stock that each day someone is trying to do something good for someone else in some simple manner. And I'm trying to take some note of that as these examples of like guiding initiatives for me, because it helps mold and shape me to be fully aware of the decency that does exist in the United States where I live and the world at large. We each have a story to tell, and the friend I lost, it was difficult. It was difficult, but we've all had loss in our lives. There's a lot of unnecessary noise out there each day. I say to myself, how can I find a way to make a unique positive impact? Maybe no one ever told you that you are special and that you've done something that's wonderful on this earth. I try to do that and emphasize it in a lot of the stories that I write in Something Happened Today and Profiles in Kindness. And that's what I do each day, even with the loss of a friend. I try to reflect on it and see how I can grow from it. And then that helps me work through the grief as well.
Mm. As a coach, I'm an advocate of my clients asking two questions of themselves after every experience. The first one, I say to them, well, what did you do right in this experience? And it's a very basic question, but a lot of us automatically go to the negative style of thinking. Well, we're very quick to tell ourselves what we did wrong. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems with that is the more we tell ourselves what we do wrong or what we did wrong, we reprogram that into our mind and we repeat that mistake in the future. So going through any period, I say to my clients, just ask yourself, what did you do right here? And I think even the expression of that emotion, one of the things I use, Paul, is artificial intelligence to measure levels of emotional intelligence. And I see a lot of people going through grieving periods and they don't process the emotions effectively. They're there, but they're not getting enough attention. So when they do give them attention and they express the emotion, it's quite a wonderful feeling for them. So I always say to them, well, what did you do right? And the second one is I say, well, what will you do differently next time? And they
Yes.
stop and think, go, well, what could I actually do differently? And the penny doesn't drop straight away. There's that moment of silence, and then they start to go for that transderivational search, and they go really deep down. They go, well, if it happened again, I'd do this, this, and this. And then
Yeah,
that resilience starts to come through, and you can see it next time round. They're prepared.
they really are. I take that approach too, Daniel, in the sense that there's this issue of appreciative inquiry, where you take time to look at your strengths and what you do well, as you've advocated. It's like a lot of times we do focus too much on the negatives. If it's like if you give a talk, right, and you have 95% or more of the people really appreciate what you do, you get that one individual that may not like what you have to offer. And that happens in daily life. And then sometimes we hyper focus on that one comment versus like so many people are seeing the good that you're doing. It's good to focus on that much more so because that also helps not just your self-esteem, but lets you know that you have so much to offer.
Mm. I had a similar experience to this. I was in Los Angeles. I went down to San Diego, and I was asked to speak on behalf of Brian Tracy.
Ah,
And he'd had an accident and he couldn't physically speak. And so I was called in to speak to him and 250 of his audience. And what I did was I got up and I thought I delivered a great speech. And then everybody ran out of the auditorium afterwards. And I kind of stood there and I was like, what just went wrong? And so the first thing was, what went wrong?
yeah,
And one of my friends, Hans, he said to me, he said, hey, how was it? And I said, I think I really screwed up. And so
yeah,
automatically I focused on all the things that I didn't do, all the things that I missed. And I ruminated on it. And then the next morning I didn't want to get out of bed. And then Hans rang me again and he said, hey, what are you doing, man? I said, oh, I'm in bed. I'm really tired. I'm a bit jet lagged. I think I had excusitis. And he said, man, you've had 3 standing ovations this morning and you're not even here. And I was
wow,
like, whoa. And so my perception was very different from the reality. And I went to that train of thought immediately. What went wrong? What could have I done better? But it was not constructive at all. Very restrictive behavior.
yeah.
You
I
know?
hear you. Daniel, I ask this question a lot of times of myself and others that I work with as a life coach is how do you want to spend your remaining days? I mean, in my line of work, I teach in a doctorate in leadership program, and being a more effective leader involves experience everyday life and learning from it,
Mm.
being inspired as you do on this show, being kind, developing new insights as you go along. And, the main thing is having your eyes open to handling things in a better way when you get a difficult situation of adversity. And then you take action to make a situation, hopefully our community, especially here in the United States, we have a lot of issues right now we're dealing with head on. And hopefully we make this world a place that you can thrive and empower others. Um, that's been my goal in life. And I'll tell you, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I didn't get it. Now I've seen things along the way, and I try to make sure that I emphasize that good in others and see it. And some people, you have to turn on a switch sometimes to make sure that you're looking for good in the world.
We're going to talk about resilience in a moment. And for our friends who are joining us live and on the replay, what I'd like to know from you is what is your definition of resilience? What is your definition? I'd like you to share it in the comments box below. Uh, we often talk a lot here, Paul, about resilience. And there's a saying from Japan. Japan's just north of me, not too far from here. And the Japanese have a saying, fall down 7 times, get back up 8 times. And as a quote, I love that about resilience. But I believe that today we also have to have mental resilience and we need to have emotional resilience. And I'd like to explore that further with you today. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're joining us now, we're joined by Dr. Paul Kotz. We're going to learn about resilience. He's also a life coach, and I started my journey, Paul, as a life coach. And at that time, I was cabin crew, an air steward working for Emirates Airline. And we'd go into these briefings, and it was about 2 a.m. your time in the morning, and everybody's a little bit tired. And we'd sit around this big meeting table. So there'd be 17 cabin crew, sometimes 4 pilots. And you'd sit around the briefing table, and you had to introduce yourself and your special skill. And so we'd go around in a clockwise direction, and our purser, our manager, would lead the conversation. And she'd say, well, ladies and gentlemen, my name is such and such, and I'm your purser today, and this is my special skill. And sometimes they tell you that they speak 12 and 13 different languages. Yes. And they'd pass the ball, and you'd go around the circle, and most people, when they were asked what their name was, they could say their name. But when they were asked their special skill, they'd look up at the ceiling.
Yeah.
So when it come around to me, I'd say, well, my name is Daniel Tolson, and I'm a life coach. And all the eyes went on to me straight away, and people said, you're a life coach. And I said, yes, that's my special skill. And then once we got on the aircraft, the cabin crew would line up, and they'd say, can I talk to you about my boyfriend? Can I talk to you about my boyfriends?
Yeah.
And the conversation would go. So as a life coach, for you, people are always saying to you, tell me, Paul, what should I do?
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond? How do you start the conversation from there?
Yeah, I get that question. I won't say as often now because I try to set this stage up front that I can give them parallel stories, give people parallel stories of things that have happened to me where I haven't handled it very well. But experience, and you might even say wisdom, can contribute to being there for others in a way that, well, they can find that, I have the strength, I have that resilience you mentioned to deal with a situation that's difficult or a negative setting. I think luck has a lot to do with it, Daniel, but some of us have been given so many gifts. Some have been given one or two. Many people have been given multiple gifts, but often people are just fighting to be relevant in our world. And maybe like me, you've had some wake-up calls. So I share a lot of those ideas on where areas where I've had to grow and the multiple mistakes I've made through time. But does that make you an expert? Not necessarily. Sometimes you have to find in yourself some ridiculous moment that you went through and realize afterward how you handled it made you more resilient, much more strong, and you learned a few new ideas in the process. So everybody's got, as you know, Daniel, you got an individual journey you're dealing with, but when you've got somebody around you that can say, did you realize that you're an excellent speaker? Or did you realize you're great with interpersonal skills? Do you realize you've got, an analytical ability that maybe no one has seen before? Well, I'm telling you right now that you do. And that's important to be able to see that in others.
I love it. This topic of resilience, where did your journey begin? When did you first need resilience in your life?
Good question. I'll focus on one area. I used to teach high school with the K through 12 system for 15 years. And I had a young man who was in my course. So I taught world history, and then I taught a survey of mathematics course for students that struggled. But they needed to make sure that they were prepared for college. And at a young man, there's like a power differential when you're a teacher. And he approached me at the end of a class and he said, hey, Paul, he said, and I said, oh, Mr. Kotz, right? He said, yes. He says, I have a really bad drug problem. And you probably noticed that my behavior is up and down. I said, yeah, a little bit. I said, some days you're really tired and other days you're so affectionate and you want to be with everybody and so on. And well, he had a severe meth addiction. And I knew that he had some drug issues, but I didn't know specifically what it was. Long story short, he told me that if you Dr. K, would get in between myself and the drug, I could take you down. And I thought, wow, it took a lot of courage for him to say that to me. He says, but I care about you as an instructor. I care about what you have to offer, but I'm telling you, I've got a problem. And one of the difficult things for me was to try to get him help after he acknowledged that, knowing fully well that he could get suspended from school.
Mm.
Well, he had to be suspended for a while and he needed to go get help. But I saw what he went through in his struggles with addiction and the issue that he had to confront with being resilient to trying to live each day saying, no, I need to take my life in a better direction.
Mm.
I saw this train wreck kind of unfolding before my eyes initially, but he worked it through and eventually got to a point where he could function on a day-to-day basis and get back into society feeling good about himself. I didn't transform that in any way because I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. But what I could do was instill that confidence to let him, as you do, Daniel, to see that good and positive in himself.
Wonderful.
That's one example.
I'm sure there's hundreds of more there, especially growing up in the school system. I'm going to share something on the screen here, and with resilience, for me, it's one of my highest developed skills. And I have the ability to set big goals and fall over many times along the way. And I say to my clients, I say, when you set a goal, it's like Jesus carrying his cross before crucifixion. He knew he was going to fall down many times. And he told people, just help me get back up. And I love that in resilience. And I have a piece of technology that I use with our clients, and we have a look at emotional intelligence using artificial intelligence. So what I have here on the screen is it's a life journey. And through my emotional intelligence, it tracks the voice frequencies, the brainwave frequencies in our voice, and it can map out the traumatic times in your life. So for me, when I started to learn resilience was at a young age. So if we start over there on the right-hand side, shortly after birth, going through the school system, my mother started to identify learning disabilities. And she'd pointed this out to the teachers, and they said, look, Daniel's fine. He's just doing fine. But then I started to play music, and my mother kept observing me making a lot of mistakes. And I would keep repeating mistakes. I'd practice mistakes. I'd repeat mistakes. And so what was happening was I was tone deaf, and I couldn't tell the difference between different notes and different sounds. So it didn't matter if I made a mistake. I just kept repeat the mistake over and over again, and I couldn't hear the difference. And so as I'm starting to get through about 7 or 8, I'm slowing down. And then at age 11, my body collapsed. And so my spine was twisted, my hips were out of alignment, my knees were collapsing, and the hemisphere in one of the hemispheres in the brain, the left one, it had a lot of pressure on it from my skull. And so what I'd learned to live with was I was in constant pain. And so you can see that highest point there around about age 10 or 11. This is where the body collapsed, and that was the peak for me. And at that stage, I'd learned to be resilient because I just had to live in pain. And then a couple of years after that, there was a couple of more operations, etc., and then life resumed to normal. So once I started my career and started to travel around the world, I'd already developed that resiliency. And I can start to go back and pinpoint these areas where I had to learn resiliency at a young age. And so today we have this technology where we can show our clients, this is where you've had some challenges in the past. And if we can go back here and have a look at what you learned, you can be more resourceful.
Yes.
And so once they start to use this technology, they go, oh, that's exactly what I learned. And so as we coach them, we say, well, how could you apply this to your current situation? And then automatically they have those resources. And it's an amazing tool that we're now using to help our clients along the way.
Oh, it's excellent, Daniel. It's good to use, a lot of times in the US, we sometimes go fly by the seat of our pants in decision making, but it's good to use some of the science behind it and also to back it up with some credibility like you've done.
This artificial intelligence we have now, we've got 100,000 case studies on it. and it's around the world, and we're even using it in different parts of the world to detect COVID-19. And there's a whole science behind it. But what it can bring up and how it increases self awareness is amazing. There was some research, and we just mentioned Daniel Goleman before. Goleman out of Harvard said that only about 36% of the population can identify the emotions and feelings at any given time. And so when we can incorporate that science, it gives people that confidence to say, yes, that's what it is. And I refer these to like a blood test. When you go to the doctor does an examination, and the doctor wants to be really confident before he prescribes you anything. So he sends you out for a diagnostic. And then you come back and you have a look at the diagnostic together. Well, we're done the bloods. Everything's fine there. We can cancel that out. After we've done the bloods, let's go to the x-rays. You can go to the x-ray. If there's anything that's out of alignment there, you can identify it. If not, you move on to the MRIs. And so this gives you the confidence to understand yourself better. And I think we're so blessed today to be in this area where we've got this technology to support us, plus the tools of coaching.
I would ask you too, as an audience too, that, what do you want to do with your life? And sometimes that's hard to define. And there's a lady by the name of Anna Taylor. She said that some people arrive and make such a beautiful, beautiful impact on your life, you can barely remember what life was like without them. And hopefully you have met or will meet somebody like that in your life. For me, I try to practice this idea of gratitude and thank those people who provide that indelible mark. When someone is in true pain and you can't help them, that's an awful, uncomfortable feeling. When someone's struggling, like the story I was telling about that student I had with addiction, we often want to try to fix it, only to realize that we stand helplessly on the sidelines and witness, a difficult situation unfold before our eyes. Or maybe you notice someone who lacks confidence, but you see the abundance of talent they have and the heart they possess. You let them know in no uncertain terms, in my mind, that they've got game or what it takes to meet a positive goal. As you reference the emotional intelligence qualities, Daniel, you have to reinforce the value of a person. We all have value. And then they sometimes believe it and begin to believe it when they know we're behind them. But then the great thing is when they act on it, and then they emerge out of maybe they have a self-imposed cocoon, or maybe someone else put them in a situation or their own kind of self-imposed prison where they never fully, truly realize the light they have within their heart and soul. So my hope is that they realize that sentence they might have served or that feeling of being cloistered in their own heart and soul emerges, and they're ready to move on with their lives and do something positive or continue that positivity throughout their life.
One of my friends here, Yvonne Patterson, says it's incredible how resilient we can be at times of real pressure or challenge, and yet sometimes for far smaller challenges can put us under. Words of wisdom there from Yvonne. Now, Paul, you've also written 2 books, and I'd love to learn more about these. The first book that you wrote, I think, was around about 2018, and that was the book Something Happened Today. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. And that book was based on, my daughters are now 30 years old and older. And I initially started writing that now it's over 20 years ago. I would just write stories, put them in a file, but I was trying to have my daughters see me in a different light from when they were infants and young girls, to me now as an adult. But what it blossoms from there, Daniel, and that I said, I want to capture stories of people doing things that are either magnanimous, good in our society, and I'm not the only one doing that. I enjoy writing those stories. And some people say, well, geez, you're looking at things from a positive lens. Aren't your eyes open to the negativity? And sure, that's illustrated in this book, but it's a lot about seeing that good in everyday circumstances. And I have found that helps me to get up each morning and attack challenges that are there right in front of us. I know by the end of the day, I can get thoroughly exhausted, especially when you're working with others. You need to replenish that good energy you have in your heart and soul. But I find that when I write and share it with others, they enjoy it and then they get empowerment from that. And so that's something happened today is truly, that's the essence of it, trying to see the good in everyday circumstances.
And so you've written this book, and then you've written a second book, and you've released a new book in 2020, which is Profiles in Kindness. So
Yeah.
I've got it here on the screen here. If you'd like to share us an insight into your book.
Oh, you're kind. Yes, it was released, believe it or not, when the pandemic really hit North America fully. It was released in April of 2020, and it's been well received. It has its own niche because you can tell there's a person that's really reaching for the skies and trying to figure out, again, like we were talking about, those positive aspects in life. But what's different in this book is I try to look at the aspects that come up with Greenleaf's work, Daniel Greenleaf, that deals with the idea of servant leadership and how do we lead and handle those resilient challenges that we face on a daily basis. It's got a lot of funny stories, a lot of stories of where I have failed and how I've picked myself up, as well as what I see in others and examples of how they've overcome challenges. One thing I should emphasize, I used to hang this up in a classroom when I taught the young people I referenced in high school years ago. This issue of those who do not make mistakes do not make anything. And I found that, mistakes for all of us, right, are a nice springboard for seeing what we're good at and where we can improve. And so this book is really focused on that in particular.
Wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'll do is I'll put a link to Paul's books in the chat box below. So after we've finished the live stream, you can go in there. Actually, we can probably do it right now, Paul. Let's do it live. Gee, we're blessed with this good technology. we don't have to wait. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a look in the chat box right now, we've got the links to Paul's 2 books here, and you can simply click on here and go straight over to Amazon and get your copies. Now, Paul, I want to take a quick deep dive and learn more about you personally. And so I've got 5 rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready to go?
Sure.
I want to know what frustrates you the most. What's the most frustrating thing for you?
It references something we were talking about earlier where you're putting your best foot forward. You're trying to do what you can. And you know that maybe you couldn't reach everybody in your audience, or maybe you couldn't connect fully. I'm a connector, and I enjoy seeing people thrive and find out what they're good at. That's one reason I went into education. For me, it's the frustrating thing is when we can't fully connect with that one individual or 2 individuals. So try to take that extra effort to do it, but sometimes we fail.
And the most embarrassing moment in your life was?
I would say it was, I had a boss by the name of Doug Landry, who's now deceased, in the insurance industry before I got into education. And I came in with these wonderful reports into his office, and he said, Paul, you need to wear a belt. And he says, your fly is open. You need to take care of these things if you're going to be successful in business. You've got to have a good look about you. So I learned a lesson right there and was thoroughly embarrassed.
I think that was the exact reason why my grandfather sent my father away when he met him. He said, a man without a belt's not taking out my daughter.
Yeah, I get it.
Huh. You're an author, and I could only assume that you're an avid reader also. Out of all the books that you've read, which one book has had the biggest impact on your life?
There's a book by Alan Loy McGinnis. It's Seeing the Best in People and how to find the best in others. That's one of my favorite books of all time. It's almost like a Dale Carnegie book, and how to improve yourself, how to be a success without really trying, that kind of thing. But I love reading about stories of others that have overcome adversity.
So we spoke earlier on about losing a long-term friend and the emotions that went with it. For you over the years, what's been the one mental or emotional block that's held you back the most?
Mm. You know, it's that sense again that you can't really show that goodness that you have within. It may not be something that people want to see at the time, and you want to share it with others, but no one seems to be truly listening. So for me, when I see that in others, it's frustrating for me to try to unlock that in people, including myself. I find my best working moments are usually in the morning, not 2 a.m. like from our it is. But I will
240.
say that I do some of my best writing at around 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning. And then as soon as I jot down some ideas to get through that block that you mentioned, then I find that I can go back to sleep with some comfort. So it's almost like there's a burgeoning urge from my heart and soul to say, you've got to write about this. So sometimes you do some of your best work, maybe in the dreams you have and in your thought processes. So it's good to have something like a paper and pencil, or even your electronic notepad or computer, just so that you can jot some ideas. But I never thought that early in the morning would be such a good, grand time to emphasize some of those ideas and emotional feelings too.
Mm. I remember Neil Donald Walsh when he wrote the book Conversations with God. He was up
Yeah.
at 2 and 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning, writing non-stop. So for somebody who was experiencing the same mental or emotional block as you were, what advice would you share with them?
I think getting a good rest makes such a difference. It seems like such a simple thing. Taking care of yourself in being emotionally healthy, physically healthy, especially in this pandemic time. We have issues with quarantine here in the United States, and it's important that you find a way to challenge your mind, but your heart and soul. So good walking, maybe getting out and just getting that fresh air in your heart and soul makes a difference. I think that's important. The other thing is, I love music, love listening to music. It really can calm the soul. It can also excite you for your next task at hand. And then try to reach out to those people that can help build you up. um, you're gonna have adversarial people in your life, people that are going to challenge you. That's also good, don't get me wrong, but I think you need to, at this time, especially when we're not as connected, I think it's very important that we take that time to seek out those individuals that are going to help build us up and let us see some of those strengths that we mentioned earlier.
Ladies and gentlemen, words of wisdom from Dr. Paul Kotz. Paul, thank you so much for staying up till 2:40 a.m. in the morning there. I really
It's a pleasure.
appreciate that. And I know all of our friends and followers who will be joining us live and watching on the replay will really enjoy what you've shared. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate the opportunity.
Always a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, we're being joined by author Dr. Paul Kotz. As you have a look through the comments feed here, you'll also see links to his books on Amazon, and I encourage you to go over there and take a look at them straight away. So, Paul, thank you so much and have a wonderful morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you all again very soon. Have a wonderful day.